Stop for a moment and ask yourself, are you truly ready to hear this? Not everyone will, and that's exactly the point. Some messages are too sharp, too clear, too demanding for the unprepared. They expose habits, challenge comfort, and confront excuses before offering solutions. If your first reaction is resistance, anger, or doubt, pay attention. This is where truth begins, not where it ends. Clarity does not negotiate. It separates readiness from avoidance. What you are about to hear will either awaken something dormant within you or push you away entirely. The choice is silent but real. Not every message is meant for every listener because timing itself acts as a filter. Words do not exist in isolation. They land on people who are standing in different seasons, carrying different capacities, wounds, expectations, and levels of readiness. The same sentence can sound like wisdom to one person and like pressure to another, not because the message changed, but because the listener did. Timing determines whether truth feels like guidance or like an attack. When someone hears a message before they are ready, it often feels heavy, confusing, or even offensive. That doesn't mean the message is wrong. It means the moment is wrong. Just as you wouldn't give advanced instructions to someone who hasn't mastered the basics, clarity often waits for alignment before it becomes useful. This is why some people listen and feel nothing, while others listen and feel exposed. The message hasn't selected favorites, timing has selected responders. Life unfolds in stages, and each stage has its own language. A message meant for transition will frustrate someone committed to comfort. A message meant for growth will sound extreme to someone still negotiating stability. When timing is off, people defend themselves instead of receiving instruction. They argue, rationalize, or disengage, not because they disagree intellectually, but because the message demands a movement they are not yet willing to make. Timing also protects people. Certain truths, if revealed too early, can damage rather than develop. Information without maturity produces confusion. Instruction without readiness produces rebellion. That's why clarity often comes suddenly after a long period of silence. The silence wasn't absence, it was preparation. When the moment arrives, the message feels sharp, direct, and undeniable because it matches the internal state of the listener. In that moment, resistance drops, not because the message is softer, but because the heart is open. This is why crowds react differently to the same words. Some feel called, others feel judged, others feel bored. Timing quietly separates those who are ready to move from those who still need time. And there is no shame in not being ready yet. Readiness is not moral superiority. It is alignment between inner capacity and external instruction. When timing and message meet, understanding happens without effort. Conviction happens without force, and action follows naturally. Not because someone was pushed, but because the moment finally arrived. Clarity often comes before comfort, not after it, because real direction is designed to realign, not to soothe. When clarity appears, it usually interrupts routines, questions, assumptions, and challenges habits that have become familiar. Comfort thrives on predictability, but clarity thrives on truth. That is why the first reaction to clear instruction is rarely relief, it is tension. The mind resists what the heart has not yet accepted, and the emotions protest before understanding has time to form. People expect clarity to feel peaceful, but most of the time it feels disruptive because it exposes what must change rather than affirming what already exists. Comfort tells you that where you are is acceptable. Clarity tells you where you need to go. Those two messages cannot sound the same. When clarity arrives, it highlights misalignment between current behavior and future direction. That exposure feels uncomfortable because it removes excuses. Once something is clearly seen, it can no longer be ignored. That is why many people delay seeking clarity, preferring vague hope over precise instruction. Vagueness allows escape routes, clarity closes them. It demands a response, even if that response is resistance. This is also why clarity is often mistaken for harshness. People confuse emotional discomfort with error. They assume that if a message disturbs them, it must be wrong or poorly delivered. In reality, the disturbance is often the friction between truth and attachment. When someone is deeply attached to a pattern, even gentle clarity feels aggressive. Comfort whispers, but clarity speaks plainly. It does not adjust its volume to preserve feelings. It adjusts direction to preserve purpose. Clarity before comfort is a form of mercy, even though it doesn't feel like it at first. It prevents wasted years, repeated cycles, and silent frustration. It draws a line between what is sustainable and what is merely familiar. Only after adjustment happens does comfort return, but it is a different kind of comfort. It is not the comfort of avoidance, but the comfort of alignment. The peace that follows clarity is earned, not given. It comes from knowing that even though the process was uncomfortable, it was honest. Those who grow learn to tolerate the discomfort of clarity without immediately rejecting it. They sit with it long enough to understand what it is asking of them. Over time, they realize that comfort built on confusion is fragile, while discomfort rooted in clarity leads to stability. The order matters. Clarity disrupts first, comfort follows later, reshaped by truth rather than protected by illusion. Resistance to truth usually reveals unreadiness, not error, because the first instinct of an unprepared mind is self-protection. When a message challenges long-held beliefs, habits, or identities, the natural reaction is not analysis but defense. The body tightens, the emotions rise, and the mind begins searching for reasons to dismiss what it has just heard. This reaction feels like discernment, but most of the time it is fear of disruption. Truth threatens stability before it offers direction, and unreadiness prefers the safety of the familiar over the risk of change. When people are ready, truth may still be uncomfortable, but it does not feel hostile. It feels demanding yet reasonable. Unreadiness, however, turns even accurate insight into something offensive. The message is labeled as harsh, unnecessary, or poorly timed. The problem is rarely the content, it is the cost. Truth requires movement, and unreadiness resists any demand that leads away from current patterns. That resistance then gets justified with logic, criticism, or moral language, even though the real issue is internal hesitation. This is why two people can hear the same statement and react in opposite ways. One feels exposed but grateful, the other feels attacked and irritated. The difference is not intelligence or character, but readiness. Readiness allows a person to separate their identity from their habits. Unreadiness fuses the two. So any challenge to behavior feels like a personal insult. In that state, defending the self becomes more important than understanding the message. Resistance also creates distortion. When people are not ready, they exaggerate tone, question motives, or focus on delivery rather than substance. This shifts attention away from what was said to how it was said. It is a subtle way of avoiding responsibility while appearing thoughtful. The truth remains intact, but it is buried under emotional noise. Over time, repeated resistance builds a pattern where clarity is consistently avoided and growth slows without obvious failure. Unreadiness does not mean permanent inability. It often signals that something beneath the surface has not yet been confronted. Fear of loss, fear of exposure, fear of change, or fear of responsibility can all block reception. Until those fears are addressed, truth will continue to feel like pressure instead of guidance. The moment readiness increases, the same truth that once felt offensive suddenly feels obvious. Nothing about the message changes, only the listener does. Resistance fades, not because the truth softened, but because the inner capacity to receive it expanded. Some instructions sound offensive before they sound wise because they collide with pride, assumptions, and self-image before they reach understanding. When an instruction confronts how someone sees themselves, it feels less like guidance and more like an accusation. People often assume that wisdom should arrive gently, affirming what they already believe. But instructions designed to produce growth rarely do that. They interrupt narratives people have built about their competence, their effort, or their intentions. Before the mind can evaluate the value of the instruction, the ego reacts to the perceived threat. Offense is usually emotional, not logical. It rises when instructions imply that something must change, be corrected, or be unlearned. Even accurate direction can feel insulting if it suggests that past choices were incomplete or misaligned. This is why first reactions are unreliable measures of truth. What feels offensive at the surface may simply be unfamiliar or demanding. Wisdom does not always introduce itself politely. Sometimes it arrives bluntly because subtlety would be ignored. Time often reveals the difference between insult and insight. Instructions that initially provoke anger or dismissal often resurface later as clarity. Once emotions settle, people begin to see what the instruction was pointing toward.
The offense fades and the value becomes visible. This delay does not mean the instruction improved, it means the listener matured. Wisdom often waits for humility to catch up with hearing.
Offensive sounding instructions also expose attachment to control. People prefer guidance that allows them to remain in charge, making minor adjustments without surrendering authority. Strong instructions remove options. They do not ask for negotiation. They demand response. That firmness is what triggers offense. It challenges the belief that growth should happen on one's own terms. But real transformation rarely respects comfort or convenience. There is also a difference between tone and intention. Many reject instructions because they dislike how they are delivered, not because they are wrong. This focus on tone becomes a shield, allowing people to dismiss content without engaging it. Wisdom does not depend on presentation to remain true. If an instruction remains valid even after the emotion passes, it was never an insult, only a mirror. Those who grow learn to pause before reacting. They allow space between hearing and judging. In that space, offense loses its power and understanding gains ground. What once felt harsh begins to feel necessary. The instruction doesn't change, but perception does. What sounded offensive becomes recognizable as wisdom, not because it became softer, but because the listener became humbler. Silence can be a response when alignment is missing, because communication is not only about speaking, but about timing and readiness. Silence often feels like absence, neglect, or distance, yet many times it functions as a mirror. When alignment is lacking, words lose their effectiveness. Instructions given in that state are misunderstood, resisted, or misused. Silence prevents damage that premature clarity can cause. It creates space for reflection, exposure, and internal adjustment before external direction is reintroduced. People often interpret silence as disapproval or rejection, but silence does not always mean something is wrong with the message or the messenger. It can mean the listener is not positioned to receive what would be said. Alignment involves posture, intention, and willingness. Without these, even clear communication becomes noise. Silence then is not punishment, it is restraint. It refuses to force understanding where readiness has not yet developed. Silence also disrupts dependency. When answers stop coming, people are pushed inward. They are forced to examine motives, patterns, and assumptions instead of relying on constant instruction. This discomfort is intentional. Continuous guidance can create passivity, where growth becomes dependent on being told what to do next. Silence removes that safety net, compelling individuals to confront what they already know but have avoided applying. There is also a refining aspect to silence. It tests persistence and sincerity. Those who are merely curious drift away when silence appears. Those who are aligned stay attentive, patient, and responsive even without constant affirmation. In this way, silence separates desire from discipline. It reveals who is committed to growth and who is only interested in reassurance. Silence can also signal a need for internal realignment before external progress continues. Movement without alignment leads to confusion and repeated cycles. Silence slows the process just enough for correction to occur. It allows gaps to surface between intention and behavior. Once those gaps are addressed, communication often resumes with greater clarity and impact. Many misunderstand silence because they equate value with constant feedback. But meaningful direction is not measured by frequency of words. It is measured by effectiveness. Silence preserves effectiveness by waiting for the right condition. When alignment is restored, a single sentence can do more than months of conversation. The absence of words sharpens attention, increases sensitivity, and prepares the listener for depth. Those who mature learn not to panic in silence. They learn to treat it as information rather than abandonment. Silence becomes a signal to adjust, listen inwardly, and realign actions with intentions. When that work is done, clarity returns naturally, not because silence ended, but because alignment made speech necessary again. Selection is not rejection, it's preparation. Because the purpose of guidance is not to exclude arbitrarily, but to match readiness with opportunity. Life does not operate on universal acceptance. It operates on timing, alignment, and capacity. When certain individuals respond to instruction and others do not, it is not because the message failed or was biased. It is because people are at different stages in their journey. Selection ensures that those who are ready receive what they need without being hindered by those who are not prepared. It is not a denial, but a filtering that protects both the message and the listener. Preparation often requires separation. Growth cannot occur in uniformity or in the presence of distraction. Those who are aligned with a message or instruction are able to absorb it fully, while those who are not aligned may distort it or reject it outright. The act of selection prevents misuse and preserves integrity. It is not personal, it is structural. By allowing certain individuals to engage while others watch, the process creates a stage where learning can happen efficiently and effectively without interference from unprepared participants. Selection also fosters readiness in those who are excluded temporarily. When someone notices that they are not part of a chosen group, it can act as a mirror, revealing gaps in understanding, discipline, or commitment. This observation is not a punishment, it is an opportunity to adjust, prepare, and eventually participate. Preparation requires time, and selection provides that time without forcing premature exposure that could lead to frustration or failure. Furthermore, selection highlights the value of responsibility. Those who are chosen carry a duty to respond appropriately, knowing that the opportunity is rare and intentional. The act of preparation is not passive, it demands action, reflection, and alignment. Without selection, instruction could become diluted and the impact would be lost. By maintaining standards of readiness, the process ensures that outcomes are meaningful and sustainable rather than temporary or superficial. Selection also reveals priorities. Life rarely allows everyone to engage fully with every opportunity. The act of choosing signals what is important, what must be pursued seriously, and what deserves focus. Those who are ready step forward, while those who are not are given time to catch up. The separation is not rejection of potential, it is recognition of current capability. In this way, selection serves as a mechanism of preparation, ensuring that growth occurs in an intentional, structured, and productive manner. Discomfort is often the doorway to elevation because growth rarely occurs within the confines of comfort. Comfort lulls people into routines, reinforces existing patterns, and creates an illusion of stability. When something new challenges those patterns, it generates tension. That tension feels uncomfortable because it exposes gaps between where a person is and where they could be. The more significant the potential for growth, the sharper the discomfort. Elevation, by contrast, requires movement beyond familiar boundaries, and movement inevitably produces resistance, uncertainty, and strain. Discomfort signals that a shift is occurring, that old limitations are being tested, and that the next level is within reach. The initial response to discomfort is often avoidance. People instinctively retreat from anything that threatens security, predictability, or identity. They cling to familiar routines, excuses, or rationalizations to justify staying in place. Yet, those who recognize discomfort as a signal rather than a barrier begin to see opportunity. The sensation of unease is not a warning to stop, but an indication that progress demands courage, persistence, and adaptation. Discomfort becomes a compass pointing toward the areas that require attention and transformation. Discomfort also serves as a filter, separating temporary effort from lasting commitment. When elevation requires sacrifice, only those willing to tolerate short-term strain can reach the next level. The discomfort weeds out half-hearted attempts and ensures that growth is earned rather than casually obtained. In this way, difficulty is not punishment, it is preparation, refining endurance, patience, and perspective. Each challenge faced without avoidance strengthens capacity and resilience, creating the foundation for sustainable elevation. Furthermore, discomfort exposes hidden weaknesses. It highlights resistance, unexamined habits, and assumptions that have been allowed to persist unnoticed. These are the obstacles that must be confronted before real progress can occur. The intensity of the discomfort correlates with the depth of the transformation available. Without this tension, people can remain stagnant, mistaking familiarity for competence and security for achievement. Elevation requires recognition of gaps and the willingness to engage with them directly, even when it is unpleasant. Those who learn to navigate discomfort develop perspective. They understand that growth is not immediate or easy, and they measure progress by resilience rather than ease. The doorway to elevation is never convenient, but it is always revealing, shaping, and indispensable for those who aspire to reach beyond their current state. Discomfort signals the path forward. Those who embrace it find that it leads to strength, insight, and advancement that comfort could never provide. Only those willing to change will truly understand, because comprehension is not merely intellectual, it is experiential. True understanding requires openness, flexibility, and the courage to adjust behaviors, beliefs, and perspectives. Information alone does not create transformation, it only informs. Without a willingness to act, messages, insights, or instructions remain abstract, often misunderstood or dismissed entirely. Change is the bridge between hearing and grasping. When someone resists adjustment, they may hear the words perfectly but fail to internalize their significance. Understanding in its deepest form is inseparable from application. Resistance to change often comes from comfort with existing patterns. People cling to familiar routines, habits, or interpretations because they provide a sense of security, even if that security is limiting. When a message challenges these patterns, it can feel threatening rather than enlightening. The unwillingness to move keeps understanding superficial. It is not a matter of intelligence or perception, it is a matter of disposition. Only those who are prepared to act on what they hear can experience insight fully. Without readiness to change, knowledge becomes static, like a map that is never used to navigate. Willingness to change also requires humility. Understanding exposes gaps between current states and potential outcomes. Those unwilling to confront these gaps may rationalize, ignore, or argue against the message to preserve comfort. Willingness to change allows individuals to set aside ego, preconceptions, and defensiveness, creating space for clarity. The ability to act on instruction demonstrates that comprehension is active rather than passive. Those who act begin to see patterns, connections, and implications that remain invisible to those who refuse adjustment. Change also functions as a filter for alignment. Messages, guidance, or insight are often universal in intention, but selective in impact. The ones who are willing to shift their approach, habits, or mindset are the ones who align with the purpose behind the instruction. For others, the same message remains confusing, irrelevant, or even frustrating. Understanding is not simply receiving information, it is meeting it halfway through personal adaptation. Without movement, the message cannot fully take root. Ultimately, willingness to change transforms passive hearing into active understanding. It bridges the gap between observation and integration, allowing knowledge to translate into growth. Those who resist remain outside the full scope of insight, while those who adapt unlock the depth, relevance, and power of what is being communicated. Understanding is not merely intellectual, it is a lived response, and change is the only pathway to it. Now you know the message was never for everyone. It was meant for those willing to see, to adjust, and to act. Understanding comes not from comfort, but from courage. Those who resist remain where they are, trapped by familiarity, while those who embrace it step into clarity, growth, and purpose. Don't rush to justify or ignore what unsettled you. Let it refine you instead. Elevation demands response, not agreement. If this reached you, it is not by accident. Stand, align, and move. The message has spoken. Now the question is, what will you do with it?